In our society, when we say that somebody is retired, we think that he's tired. This tall man is not tired. He's just taking a spiritual rest. So I'm privileged to have an experienced man, a resource person who will co-chair with me this panel discussion. Can you hear me from the back?
Yes.
All right. We have dealt with the realities of Africa from His Grace, the Archbishop of the Anglican Church of Tanzania, where he was developing religion, democracy, and development in Africa. I don't want to go back to the definitions he has given, but I want to remind you that when he said that 218 million people in Africa live under the level of true life in abundance, and that 29 countries of Africa have not reached the line of sustainable life. That's too much, and that democracy in Africa is not yet at the top. He mentioned Tanzania, Ghana, and so forth. And also, there is something which is politically being developed in Africa. We moved from colonialism to democracy. And now, we are making a monarchical culture. That means there is an elected president, or a president who has taken power through a coup d'etat. Then he will stay there for decades, preparing his son to take over from him. We have some examples in Africa. Actually, there are even one who is preparing his wife to take over from him. So we are changing from colonialism to democracy now. We are just introducing a new way of governance in Africa. And when he said about one of the countries whose presidents don't want to leave power, he mentioned Burundi. I'm fortunate to have the mic, so I would like to give some lights about Burundi. We have gone through political ups and downs. As I told you, 3 decades of military regime, until 1993, when the democratically elected regime was overthrown by the military, and the civil war erupted, claiming over 300,000 human beings being killed, and 500,000 outside as refugees. And there is a group of people who started the rebellion. So in 2004, there was a peace agreement signature. It was led by former President of South Africa, Honorable Nelson Mandela. And Burundians, after 2 years of political discussion, dialogue, negotiations, they have signed the peace agreement, the peace process. Then they make a transitional regime. That means the army, which was still in power, had 18 months. Then, after 18 months, the power was now transferred to the civilian for another 18 months before elections. This President Nkurunziza was not among those who discussed, who negotiated in Arusha. He was still in rebellion. So in 2003, he signed the agreement. Then he was appointed a Minister of Good Governance in 2003 and 2004. In 2004, the civil man who was a president made the constitution, and it was voted through a referendum. And in 2005, then, there was what we call a post-conflict election. The president was elected by the elected parliament. So the constitution which Pierre Nkurunziza is relying on was not his project. I want to tell you the truth as a Burundian. If President Nkurunziza was not the president of Burundi, we should have had in 2015 somebody claiming a third term presidential office, because they have made two small tricky articles in the constitution when they were in Arusha. If you meet politicians themselves sharing a glass of beer, they would say, well, you know, we were thinking that we would be managing that time, so we made that tricky article, thinking that those who are still in a rebellion will not discover what we have been discussing when we negotiated. So when Peter Nkurunziza discovered that they made a tricky constitution, he said, well, I'm a manager of the constitution you have given me. That's how he has claimed a third term, thinking that the first 5 years were just a post-conflict. It was not through general elections. So in 2010, first general election, 2015, second term general elections. And I remember him saying, officially, when he was making an official speech, he said, this is my last term. We don't know. It's African. We don't know. Because this week, he's going to appoint a constitutional commission to revisit the constitution. Because when the former president of Tanzania, William Mkapa, is chairing the dialogue of the political diaspora within Burundi, there is a national dialogue throughout where everybody is given a mic and a pen and a white paper. You write, you respond to the question, what are the problems in Burundi and what solutions do you propose? So you write one paper, one page, second, then you read all this on TV, on the radio, fearlessly. Then they have collected all those papers. These last 6 months, they are putting them into groups. And I know that most of the people say we have to review and revisit this constitution. So this week is going to appoint a commission. And on Friday, I will be facilitating a political meeting. All the politicians will be around one table in the north of the country of Burundi. I don't know how the government has pointed my name, and they have invited me. We discussed before I flew to this place, and I said, Bishop, Your Grace, you have to accept to facilitate that political meeting. I was fearing, but when they saw me the job description, I said, no, it's okay, it's our calling. And second, in 2010, I was the vice chair of the Electoral Commission in my district. And in 2015, I was the chair. So if we talk about elections in Burundi, I know. If we talked about political tricky words, I know them. I know Burundians. I know we have been discussing many times, I know. So I want to say that President Nkurunziza probably will not be as one of those presidents who want to make their sons or their wives heirs of the throne, because in 2020 we are going to have our general elections, so we don't know what those elections hold on. So I move now to the possible roles of regions, as His Grace has said. You know, in Africa we are noticing that there is a religious extremism, mainly on Islamic level. I don't know where Islam is the minority, whether Christianity is persuading Islam, but where Christianity is the minority, there are very many problems. And he said that development is for a whole person, being spiritual or physical. And that I want to add that the church is the only agency which can promote development even to people who don't belong to the church. Did you know that? Yes, that's true. The church is well, it's peaceful. If it were somewhere in Africa, we should have, you know. So, we have some values with the church. He mentioned that WCC has tried the Anglican Church of South Africa. But in conclusion, dialogue always is the best solution to end the conflict. I don't know whether Emeritus Bishop can continue and add of what Dr. Ode said about the Sunni Shia conflict in Nigeria. Then when you finish, you ask him a question why he didn't say anything about the role of Iran in those conflicts.
Yeah, so if you want, I can.
No. Let him, then we'll give you a...
Now that you've asked him, let him respond.
Okay. Emeritus, with his wisdom, says, let him respond first. Then I continue.
Good. Maybe I will go then. It is very much interesting about Iran and Africa, because Iran, at the beginning, immediately in '79, after the revolution, some countries closed they were afraid of export of the revolution inside their country. They closed the embassies of Iran. For example, in Kenya, there was an embassy, and then it was closed in '79. Immediately after the revolution in Iran, it was closed. So Iran changed their policy, especially towards Africa, and they say, we are not interested in exporting our revolution to Africa. What we want is friendship of Africa, and they say that what they want is to strengthen Islam, both Shia and Sunni in Africa. So strengthening of Islam, it was the motto of Iran in Africa. And in fact, from my experience in Kenya, they had a very big embassy there with a religious attaché. And what they used to do, they used to invite ayatollahs from Iran to come to Kenya and have a common conference, Shia, Islam, Sunni conference. And then they said, we are not interested in exporting our religion. What we want to strengthen Islam. This is what they say, to strengthen Islam. And in their embassy, for example, they used to have conferences inviting ayatollahs to Kenya and having a joint conference between the Sunnis and the Shias together. And this was the policy of Iran up to this day. They say, we don't want to export our revolution. What we want to strengthen Islam. This is our main purpose in Africa. And this is what they are doing, as I mentioned, in their embassy in Kenya, for example. They used to invite ayatollahs to Iran, to Kenya, to do a joint conference about how to strengthen Islam. So this is the policy of Iran now in Africa, to strengthen Islam. And they say This is what Khomeini wanted, to strengthen Islam, and this is what we are going to do in Africa, not to import our revolution, but to strengthen Islam. So this is now the policy of Iran in Africa.
Okay, thank you very much. We will see the way they will do it. We will see the way they will do
I
it.
have a question though. I mean, is the strengthening of Islam, is it at the expense that we heard that there's about 50-50, according to the figures, 50% Christians and 50% Muslims in Africa, about. So the strengthening of Islam will come at the expense of Christianity, because there's no extra people.
Oh, it depends on the countries. If you go to the north,
Southern Africa, it's in Nigeria.
yeah,
Oh, okay, but anyway, if it's half of Christian
if you see the Nordic countries, Islam is the majority.
Yes,
if you go
so
to the South Sahara,
yes.
the minority. But we have seen that in different countries, like Central Africa, it's a conflict between Islam and Christianity. So we have to. That's what I have said. We'll see the way Iran is going to strengthen Islam in Africa. Yes, Professor.
Thank you very much. I want to take us back to the discussion that was started by the most Reverend Jacob Eraso of Tanzania regarding religion and politics and democracy in Africa. Now, I want to ask the following question. I hope it can be clarified. I've always had a feeling that the Christian churches, at least in Africa, have had an institutional approach to politics in Africa, bringing them together, or within each church. Let me give you an example. In Kenya, we have the National Christian Council of Kenya, NCCK, which right from the 60s has always had an institutional approach to political issues. In the 60s, they published a very important newspaper called Rock, which was a very powerful newspaper which set the debate on political issues. It was actually very brave during the 1969 political oathing in Kenya, and some of the editors were detained or escaped the country and so on. The NCCK has had a very unique history in placing or organizing the church position in politics and actually bringing together an institutional approach of the Christian churches of Kenya to political issues. The Catholic Church as well, in their Justice and Peace Commission, have had an institutional approach to politics in Africa, and there are records of the positions the church has taken on certain issues through their pastoral letters and so on. The effectiveness of the commission has, however, depended on who the archbishop is, what his stand is, and how he takes his position vis-a-vis the establishment. When I go globally, the Justice, Peace and Integrity Commission for the World Council of Churches, to which I belonged in the early 90s, has always tried to shape the global debate on democracy, democratization, and issues of liberation, particularly in Southern Africa, from the point of view of the World Council of Churches. Now, in this debate, we seem to be rather eclectic in trying to discuss the role of the church in this democracy issue. I'd rather, maybe as a suggestion, try and look at how the church has institutionally. Even if you look at the liberation of Mozambique, Angola, and Guinea-Bissau, the church's intervention, the Christian church's intervention in these debates was quite systematic and quite institutional. And they did influence the mediation process between Frelimo and Renamo. I remember Ambassador Bethuel Kiplagat, who is both a member of NCCK as well as a PS, played a very important role in that process. So my question is, under the circumstances, what is the institutional role of the church in democratization now, and in conflict issues such as in Nigeria regarding Boko Haram? Now, we must finally, Mr. Chairman, distinguish between, as I said earlier, the position of certain clerics and religious fanatics in African politics, like Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab, which cannot be attributed to positions of Islam on these issues, but must be understood in terms of the deviancy that certain individuals take in religious movement. This is even found in the Bible, where you find deviants preaching in the name of Jesus Christ or in the name of certain prophets and being denounced in the Bible as deviants. So deviancy in religion, deviancy in the role of religion in politics, something this which has a long history. It is not just today. And we should not confuse religious fundamentalism of deviance from the position of the church or religion in the politics of the church. And the deviance should be treated in the context in which they arise and the extreme positions they take in historical times. Thank you.
Well, you have given part of the answer to your question, but let His Grace the Archbishop add more. You hand the mic to him. Then Your Grace, can you clarify or complement?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think I have understood his point. I'll go back to Tanzania and give what my brother has said. We in Tanzania, we have organized the church now. Now excluding now the other religions. Okay. Now as a church, we have that institutional approach, and that has helped us a lot because we created a forum, Tanzania Christian Forum, which now brings all the Christians together, and you'll have one voice to speak. For instance, during the new constitution referendum before the election, we found that what the Constitution Committee had done was a very good work, but the Parliament changed it, and so it came out with a new version of a constitution which is not for the people. And so we, as Christians all over Tanzania, which means all the Christian denomination, we came together and we released a statement to the president to tell him that we are going now to tell all the Christians not to go and do voting on that date which was already set. And so we gave this president the statement, but also we went to the churches. We read the same statement all over the country. All over the country. And so the government was not able to move in even a step. So it stopped right there. Yes. So as a church or as a religious group, we have really a role to play here, because of course we are divided the same as in Islam. They are divided with the here, but we come together and speak together with one voice towards the common benefit of the larger population. Yeah.
Thank you, Your Grace. I think what you are saying is true. Professor is awakening the churches. Don't sleep. Don't sleep. Be awakened, yes, because there are some challenges that you have to face.
Yeah.
Okay, we have never heard from a women's voice, so the mic is yours.
Thank you. My name is Brenda Sierra. I'm a non-practicing physician and a graduate student in health policy and a Christian author. So I have 3 questions.
You are from?
Kenya.
Kenya, I see.
I have 3 questions. I believe we have agreed that indeed many a times religion has been misused, not just in Africa. For example, if you think about slavery, and the time they would use the Bible to say things like, you must obey your master, you must submit to the authority that is above you. it is indeed being misused also in Africa. For example, I can choose to read from Romans 13, which says, "Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers hold on to terror for those who do right, but not for those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from fear of one in authority? Then do what is right, and you will be commended. For the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath, to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. Therefore, it is necessary to submit to the authorities, not only because of possible punishment, but also as a matter of conscience. This is also why you pay taxes, for the authorities are God's servants who give their full time to governing. Give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor." A lot is left to individual interpretation, because from this someone can decide, I should not protest against a government that is not democratic, because God says I must submit to this authority and they are there for my good. And if I don't submit, they're there to punish me, for they punish the wrongdoer. So what I want to ask is, what is the church's definition of democracy? Because you cannot say we uphold democracy when it is not clearly defined, because everyone can have their own definition of democracy, even though they read the Bible.
Okay, that's a very important question. So
Question number one.
Be reflecting on that question. We are going to answer it later. Remember that there are two other presentations that you have not heard from it. Then I have a co-chair, and he has kept quiet. So I'm not a dictator. I'm not a dictator. Let's give him a chance, okay, just to pursue. Then well, you listen. The Prime Minister has the candidates to the presidency of Kenya has said so.
I don't want to. Grace, I don't want to load it, but I think she raised a very fundamental point about religion, particularly because redemptive religions, basically Abrahamic religions, there's Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, which tend to justify repression. That and this is sometimes used by leaders, that you will get rewards for your suffering on earth here when you go up there. And therefore you must submit to authority, because these are God's servants who have been ordained to rule over you. So sometimes they give credence to the abuse of power by those who are in authority, and these have been used quite a long time. I mean, as opposed to morality religions like Hinduism, like Buddhism, which basically say that punishment is here on earth. That it's not that you will perish after you've died. You will be punished for your sins here on earth. Those tend to somehow tie the hands of the rulers, as it were. So in some places you find that religious leaders have been mum in the presence of political oppression and oppression, because they use the Bible to submit to authority. In Kenya we have interreligious council, where the churches and the Muslims and the Hindus have come together. But the church, as I mentioned earlier on in my contribution, had been, during the period of political repression, a voice of reason, which has stood sometimes with the people, though isolated, and I mentioned some religious leaders at that time. But largely, the church was fairly, to a large extent, more submissive to the authority at that time. Now, what we are witnessing right now is that the religious leaders are tending to sit back and act only when the crisis is looming. I say, for example, we have been calling for disbandment of the Electoral Commission, which had facilitated the rigging of the last elections. There are a number of reforms which we wanted to be carried out before we go to elections this coming time. But then the civil society and the religious groups were completely silent until we took to the streets and started street demonstrations and protests. When then the crisis was looming, is when they moved out of their comfort zones to say, oh, there's going to be a crisis, we need to negotiate, prompted basically by the authorities of that time. So, what am I really trying to say? I'm saying that the religious leaders need to lead from the front. I have listened carefully to what the bishop was saying about Burundi. And Burundi is a case in point. I have been involved myself personally in the negotiation for peace in Burundi. Now, and the Burundi case is not isolated when you're talking about term limits. You've seen, because that window of change which brought about change